All right, good morning. It's Me More Monday. What are we talking about today, Cameron?
Hashtag 8 can't wait.
Oh, oh, isn't that cute? Eight's a nice round number. Oh, so what are these guys all about? Let's see. Eight
I don't
can't
know.
wait.
I can't see. You've shared me with myself, though I appreciate it. I like looking at good looking stuff.
That's odd. Okay, let me fix that.
Yeah. Oh,
Oh, I just updated my video driver, and so now my monitors are out of order. How's that one?
oh, thanks, buddy.
There we go. Research shows more restrictive use of force policies can reduce killings by police and save lives. Tell your city to adopt all 8 of these policies. Okay. This is one of those where. Okay. Hamlin's Razor says never attribute to malice that which can be explained by incompetence. I am going to make the argument that these 8 policies are so targetedly and predictably negative in outcome that they cannot be attributed to incompetence. Fair?
Yeah, no, let's
What the fuck do you know? I haven't even presented any evidence yet. I was not actually planning on dropping an F-bomb that early. But the joke was just there. I couldn't resist it.
Well, no, I'm with you because I've already been on the website and read it and
Yeah.
followed it to the links, and so I get where you're going.
So, okay.
Yeah, let's start with the top, and then we go through the individual 8 policies,
and
please.
and we're gonna have to do a whole nother video on on campaign zero. Right now, we're just gonna focus on the 8 can't wait action stuff, right? Uh, immediate harm reduction, use of force policies, demilitarization, DOJ consent decrees, police union contracts, comprehensive community safety, divest from police, invest in community, including housing, jobs, and education, pay living wages, dramatically reduce jail and prison populations, restorative justice. Okay, for those of you that don't speak commie, restorative justice is just straight up what they mean is reparations. Now, let me say this about reparations. Whether you are pro or con reparations, the fact is this: over a week of looting, you got your reparations. We're done now.
Yeah, and con reparations. I refuse to feel guilty for things that happened before I was born. Just sorry. You can miss me with that nonsense, as it were.
Also, if reparations, then deport anchor babies.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
If the sins
And
of the father stain the child, then every person who has an ancestor, a father, a grandfather, a great grandfather, that came to this nation under cover of darkness and against the laws that enforce our immigration orders, is a criminal and should be deported. So, if reparation, then mass deportation. You
and then
cannot have your cake and lie in it too.
and then pay living wages. I understand that this revolves around that whole, theory that the left has, where once people have a certain amount of money, the entire scope of their life changes. But pay living wages, like that's in all reality. What does that have to do with policing? What
More
does it
than
have
that.
to?
And okay, so if your argument is that by artificially inflating wages, um, you will you will decrease poverty and therefore remove an incentive for crime. This isn't complicated. We've had a minimum wage in this country for some time. It has been a disaster.
Yeah, it was one of the, I mean, it's a classic case of something that started out with good intentions, and maybe even at the time of its passage, it was necessary. But ever since then, it has been used as nothing but a tool to appeal to the lowest common denominator. Like, seriously, if minimum wage going up is going to transform your life, the problem ain't minimum wage. It's just not.
No, you're speaking too broadly on it. More importantly, at the outset of the minimum wage, the argument is that if a person needs to make a certain amount of money, or they just can't live. It was a whole living wages argument thing then too, and much like Obamacare and socialized medicine, the detractors said no. If you do this, then this will occur. In the case of Obamacare, it was if you subsidize health insurance and require people to purchase it, and then add a huge layer of bureaucracy on top of that, your net results will be these. You will increase the need for the health, not the health insurance companies, but the health care companies, the health care industry. You will increase the need for them to have compliance administrators at cost. It costs money to employ people just to arbitrate the compliance of the regulations under Obamacare. You will lose doctors because their wages will be cut to make up for the difference. You will see rises in health costs for two reasons: because you will have removed the citizens' buying choice from the equation. Excuse me. See, when people aren't spending their own money, which is how people think about things when they use insurance. You buy an insurance policy, and people aren't smart, and they tend to think of their insurance policy as something that pays for things they want, rather than a stopgap to mitigate cost risk, which is what it is. The inability of people to understand money and insurance has been. You want to improve the living situation for your people? Teach them how money works. And start with saying, you see this? This is currency. And it's got almost nothing at all to do with money.
So, good morning, Rod. He's here in the comments. I want to acknowledge him. He said a couple of things in the chat, and I just want to read the second one because I could even hear the tone of voice. It goes, "Those hands making demands for reparations are very unclean hands. You don't get equity if you don't do equity."
So, the initial complaints against, yeah, and that's kind of exactly where I'm going with this. So the initial complaints against the idea of a minimum wage were and proved out if if you have to pay a minimum wage, if there is a wage below which you cannot pay less, then the first casualty of that will be the youth, because I'm not going to hire you to do $10 an hour worth of work if you can't do $10 an hour worth of work. If you're not worth $10, and it is in fact the case that you are not worth $10 an hour, I'm not going to hire you. So, when is somebody not worth $10 an hour? Well, if it cost me most of a movie ticket to pay an usher $10 an hour to walk up and down the aisle with a flashlight and escort people to their seats, if I have to pay that guy $10 an hour, I just won't hire that guy. I just won't. Because let me ask you, when's the last time you had a sharp-dressed young man in a top hat and a vest walk you with a flashlight to your seat in a movie theater? Most of you don't remember that ever happening. I think I remember it once or twice in the 80s, but even then it was incredibly rare. But that guy's not worth $6.75 or whatever it is. However, you pay a kid $1 an hour to do that job. You pay a 16 or 17-year-old kid $1 an hour to do that job for a hot minute. And 6 months from now, he's had a job. Doesn't matter what it paid. Doesn't matter what it did. All it matters is that when I call the boss that paid him $1 an hour for 6 months or $2 an hour for 6 months, and keep in when I say $1 an hour or $2 an hour, we're talking about, it's a nickel for a pack of cigarettes times, right? And back then it was, I'm sure they were getting 25 cents or 50 cents or something like that an hour. Because Jesus, in the 30s, 85 cents an hour was that was a not uncommon wage for a welder. Think about that. Think about that for a second. A dollar today would have got you half. I mean, it's the same as having 50 cents in 2000.
Anyhow.
Okay,
TikTok,
I went a little off there, but yes, but suffice it to say, minimum wage and this idea of the pay living wages, that's demanding a higher minimum wage. Higher minimum wage equals inflation. You cannot pay what these people think of as a living wage by fiat, because the minimum wage is the lowest wage at which the minimum wage is relative to the cost of living, and will always result in inflation, which causes the new minimum wage to dip below what people like this think is the level of a living wage. And bear in mind that part of their math includes that everybody should be spending $100 a month for a cell phone. And okay, yeah, I've got a cell phone, and my plan actually costs less than $100 a month for 3 people. But I can afford that. I've worked for that. I'd still work for that. That's not an arbitrary decision that is made in my household. Okay, and then fund community safety, fully defund police. Look,
Wait, what? Huh? Those things seem like they might be just a wee bit contradictory.
Yes, in fact, the opposite of one another. End the carceral state. Resource healthy community practices and needs. End the carceral state. Rod, the carceral state. Okay. There's your buzzword. You know what? I'm going to throw that one in the tags in just a second here. I pulled up. Oh damn! I must have closed it.
Whoops.
Oh, that was an interesting noise you made.
Carceral state.
Okay.
Rod says he hired you at $10 an hour, but I had a way for that to make money. Photocopies.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
and see, and that's when Rod hired me at $10 an hour, I was in no way worth $10 an hour at the time. In that particular job, I was easily worth $10 at the time, $10 an hour at the time. In fact, I had earned as much as $14 an hour at the time doing electrical work. But Rod hired me at $10 an hour to do real estate title examination, which I had no experience in, no knowledge in. He just knew me to be a book reading fool that could get down with some slamology. And so Rod hired me at $10 an hour and trained me to do the job he needed me to do. Which, at a base level, was photocopies, but it started off, here's a sack of quarters. You just copy things I point at. And And as we did that, he would explain, okay, I'm pointing at this thing for you to go copy because it tells us that this person owned such and such at this time and they sold to B. And if you follow the trail, then you get to say, hey, wait a minute. A sold to B, B sold to C, and then B sold back to A, so C still owns it, and now W's trying to. You remember that one, Rod? Remember that son of a bitch in J? the third party tried to sell it back to the first party without the second party ever having been incurred. Yeah. Anyway, this phrase, the carceral state. This is where I really want you to put your eyeballs. What they're talking about is the prison system. Except they're not talking about the prison system. They're talking about a kind of prison planet. Here's the idea that they have, what they're talking about. The carceral system, okay, so you got your ellipses there. And the carceral system therefore extends well beyond legal imprisonment. Prison is at bottom just its pure form within a continuum of disciplinary apparati, you nattering shit stains, and regional institutions. Okay. So this carceral state thing, carceral state thing, they're talking about this just inane concept of a prison pipeline. The argument is that the system, most especially the public education system, is designed to make young black children comfortable with institutionalization. Now, it strikes me as interesting that these people will argue that it's there to make young black children comfortable with institutionalization. But, guys, by a wide margin, black and white children go to the same schools. They are having the same basic experience of the institution of the school. If it's there to institutionalize anybody, then it's there to institutionalize everybody. But
look, I just wanted to say that if you want to say that a government school wants to institutionalize children toward pro-government positions, I'm with you on that one, 100%. But stop with your race-baiting bullshit associated with that narrative. I'm at the point now where I think as soon as you invoke race in a political or social argument, you're the philosophical equivalent to a flat earther. Like, you're not having the conversation that actually needs to be had.
Yeah, if you invoke race in a political conversation, it is the same as just going straight to the ad hominem, you're Hitler. And let's be clear, when you go straight to the ad hominem, you are Hitler, it is not different than going straight to the ad hominem, you are Satan. If you knee-jerk to the ad hominem, you are Hitler, it's because you don't know anything about Hitler. Because Hitler was you, sweetheart. And you don't have a functional intellectual basis to back up your argument. You resort to the ad hominem because you don't have an argument. And the reason you go straight to Hitler is because you're a secularist or an atheist, and Hitler is basically your religious iconography that replaces the Christian Satan.
Okay, so Rod has said in the comments a couple of times now they're trying to set up the sacking of Rome.
It's in progress.
Yes, but I think there's something really interesting to chew on here. Let's actually look at the 8 and realize how that's the slippery slope that leads us toward defunding the police. Because the 8 policies themselves, we're almost 20 minutes in and we haven't even touched them yet.
Well, for one, it's right there on the page. It's right there on the main. Oh, wow.
Don't do that.
It's right there on the page. Fully defund police.
Yes.
And they absolutely use the word abolition. These are the 8 policies. And yeah, let's go through them one at a time. It's just you here today, Rod, so we're not going to stick around for the full hour. Ban chokeholds and strangleholds. Allowing officers to choke or strangle civilians results in the unnecessary death or serious injury of civilians. Both chokeholds and all other neck restraints must be banned in all cases.
Here's what's really disingenuous about that one. The vast majority of police officer guidelines already ban chokeholds. Like my father, DeKalb County cop, we've had him on the show. Maybe we should do a pop-up and talk about this specifically. Love to have a cop's perspective on it. Anyhow, but according to him in DeKalb County, policy is you do not make contact with the neck for any reason other than absolute life or death situations. You touch not just the front where your windpipe is. You literally do not touch the neck at all, and that outside of life or death. So to say we're going to ban chokeholds and strangleholds, like they're already banned. they really are. Not saying that there's not officers who abuse it, not saying that it doesn't still happen. By and large, they're already banned. And Danny's here. Morning, Danny.
Now,
every time I pour my coffee in the morning, I think about you looking at it and your mouth watering.
Now, in fairness, in Minneapolis, where the George Floyd thing occurred, their policy does allow for contact with the neck, and it includes training explicitly in the knee on the neck for George Floyd.
Yeah. It's in our internal group thread. We had a big heated debate about this when it all popped off. And one of the points that I made was, if you really hate this, if you think it's wrong, then you need to write to the Minneapolis government and tell them that they need to eliminate as policy restraint by neck. Because, and I get it, legal doesn't make it right and illegal doesn't make it wrong. But in this case, I guarantee you one of the things that's going to come out in the wash is that Chauvin was trained in use of neck restraint and followed policy on it. And it's going to be a huge blow when it happens.
And look, in the George Floyd case, this is honestly a little more than devil's advocate. The neck restraint, he had handcuffs on and was still fighting. I can sit up and get up off the ground with 3 men on my back. Now, George Floyd isn't as big as I am, but he's still a big damn dude.
6'4", 230 pounds, according to the autopsy.
Yeah, that's a pretty big dude. But you got somebody on your neck, it changes the math. It's harder to just roll over and knock everybody off with somebody on your neck. But, I mean,
somebody that had so much fentanyl in his system, if he wasn't a regular user, it would have resulted in an overdose? You mean something like that?
Yeah, something like that. And I'm so tired of saying this. I'm not racist, but okay.
I know, right?
I'm not necessarily. I'm not saying that George Floyd deserved to die, but like we talked about on the show Friday, I keep hearing people say, "Well, George Floyd didn't deserve to die," and then they immediately say, "Nobody deserves to die in police custody." Shut up! Are you stupid? Nobody deserves to die in police custody. If there is not a justified use of lethal force for police officers, then there is no law. If the police if there's never a situation when the police are allowed to use lethal force, then they don't exist.
Well, yeah, just like I said on Friday, all you got to do is escalate the situation to a certain point to where if the police officer continues to engage with you, there's a possibility that you will die, and now you've neutered the police, because nobody should ever die in police custody. Now, the goal...
Do you want jokers? Because that's how you get jokers.
Now, the goal, and this segues really well into number two, required de-escalation. Um, okay,
That's already a thing.
that's literally any honest cop, any good cop, hell, even most of the shitty cops will tell you that's literally what police officers try and do. They literally, even if they are gonna go and arrest just the biggest, meanest sumbitch in town, they want to bring that guy in alive. That's the goal. They want to put people in front of a judge. Again, referencing my father, one of the things that he kind of had to make peace with early in his career was his job was to catch him. His job was not to convict them, but his job was to catch them and bring them to jail and let a judge and a jury sort it out. And yeah, I mean, it required de-escalation. I mean, we already, that's,
And let's look at how they phrase it. Requires officers to de-escalate situations where possible by communicating with subjects, maintaining distance, and otherwise eliminating the need to use force. And see, here it is. Where possible. And like you just said, they're there to arrest you. They're not there to kill you. Okay? And for the 10 unarmed black criminals who, by a wide margin, all but 2 of them actually assaulted the officers that killed them last year, your numbers just aren't there. The idea that the police are just out willy-nilly killing people. Of the, what was it, 1,200 lethal encounters with police that occurred last year in the United States, 10 were unarmed black men.
I thought it was 9. I'd have to go back and look at the numbers again. That was a few days ago.
And one of them was a woman. So 10 of them were black. One of them was a woman. And in one of those cases, the unarmed victim was driving a car and charging police with it. Another one was in his car, had just fired shots at the police, and then threw his gun into the passenger seat. So when he was shot, he didn't have the gun in his hand anymore. He gets listed as unarmed. That's, I mean, come on.
And just to answer Rod's question real quick, absolutely. It is in the Minneapolis Police Force guidelines that you can use neck restraint at low-level lethality as long as you go through the appropriate training, and that includes when you're allowed to use it, and when you do use it, how you're allowed to use it. And specifically, it boils down to you're not allowed to make contact with the front of their neck anywhere near their windpipe or their arteries that run alongside of it. But as far as the back of the neck, where Chauvin's knee was, according to my reading of Minnesota guidelines, that's legal in their precinct. Oh, yeah. No, Rod, we're already planning on the riots happening a second time. But yeah.
Well, we're not planning on it. BLM is planning on it. Antifa is planning on it.
Oh, they're salivating over it. Okay. So, man, I love these next two. I love these next two.
Okay. I'm just dropping a little link in the thread. Here's a news article that talks about recent responses to the neck policies and references the neck policies. But yes, Minneapolis had the neck restraint thing as a policy, and they were trained. You're right. He won't get convicted. They will riot again because these officers were trained to use the neck restraint in specific situations. And the guy is physically twice your size and hopped up on drugs is probably that. Require warning before shooting.
I mean, how far do you take something like that? Like because as I read this one, they want you to give a verbal warning 100% of the time before you pull the trigger. Does this include if a bad guy is firing at you? Do you still have to warn them? what if you're in a domestic violence situation and there's kids involved and mom or dad appears to again be hopped up on drugs and smashing dishes and cutting people with knives, but you have to warn that person too, like um Danny, give me a second. We'll answer your question there. But I mean, where does that?
Danny, yes, it is an overcharge. We're not going to go. We're just not going to go deep into that question on this show because we're already a half hour in and we need to move along. But yeah, I think upping it to second degree is probably going to be the thing that basically sabotages this case, especially since they're extending it to try and charge the other three officers. I don't think they're charging them with second degree. I think they're charging them as accessory. But
Minnesota, I forget what it's called, but it's basically an ascending and descending charge policy, and it works something like you can charge somebody with first degree murder, and then as part of it in the jury phase, it can fall down and be convicted to second degree murder, and as part of the jury phase, can fall down and be convicted of third degree murder. As I
right,
understand Minnesota law, charging them with second degree murder, they're still technically also charged with third degree murder should that be the thing that the jury determines is appropriate.
right, and the problem with that tactically is the defense gets to argue, look, they're overcharging this case because it's this case is strictly a matter of public pressure and opinion, and they don't have the law on their side. So that's how the overcharge defeats the prosecution in the courtroom. Um, that's one tactical option. But like I said, Danny gave us a thumbs up, gave us an okay. We're gonna stick with this. Requires officers give verbal warning. Yeah, the only time the officer doesn't give a verbal warning is when you're already attempting to murder him. Like it, in the vast majority of cases where a police officer shoots, like I just said, of the thousand and some lethal encounters with police last year, only 10 were unarmed black men. Only 20 were unarmed white men. And I forget, there's like 12 or 14 or something other. So,
So yeah, I love how this ties into the next one.
oh God. Requires exhaust all alternatives before shooting. Okay, for starters, hire a copy editor, shitburgers. Requires officers to exhaust all other alternatives, including non force and less lethal force options, prior to resorting to deadly force. Okay, so what you're asking for is that before the officer fires his weapon or uses any other method to cause death in the case of an encounter, first, he must use pepper spray, bear mace, uh, some
Taser,
a
Billy Club.
taser, a billy club, um, rubber bullets, pepper bullets, tear gas. Okay, so you're actively advocating for torture.
I could have just shot the guy, but instead I maced him, beat him, hit him with a couple of rubber bullets, fired tear gas, tased him, and then I shot him. I wonder why he died.
Yeah, well, Your Honor, I had to hook up the nipple clamps on the car battery to make sure that he was really dedicated to taking this all the way to lethal force.
And besides, it said in the previous one, you have to issue a verbal warning at all times. Um, at no point during all of this where you're tasing them and you're macing them and you're beating them with your billy club, at what point can you interpret that as a warning? You might just be taking things too far.
Um, okay, now we get to duty to intervene. Require officers to intervene and stop excessive force used by other officers and report these incidents immediately to a supervisor. It's been a while since we've done them, so I can't list all the cases off the top of my head, but Gonzalez versus Castle Rock is the one that comes to mind first, where the Supreme Court has determined quite simply the police don't have a duty to intervene in crimes that are in progress, even to defend the lives of the citizenry. That's right. If someone is actively murdering you in the street, the Supreme Court holds that the police are not required to stop that from happening.
Nope.
They are only duty bound to attempt to apprehend the murderer and then prosecute him for his crime.
Yep. Kind of terrifying. Now, most
In
cops
previous
are
shows when we've talked about this issue, I've listed a half a dozen or so Supreme Court cases on that. The one that always sticks in my mind is Gonzalez versus Castle Rock, where the woman had a restraining order against her ex-husband. He came to the house. She called the police. The police didn't respond. The ex-husband came in, murdered her and her children, and then I think it was her parents that brought the suit against the city for failing to protect her after the restraining order was put in place, and the courts found that the police have no duty to intervene. Their job is to investigate crimes that have occurred. One could say that the police have an active incentive not to intervene, because if there's no duty to intervene, then refraining from intervention is safer than doing the right thing. And if they're intervening every time they have the opportunity to, there's going to be fewer crimes for them to go out and try to solve, which means diminished job security. Now, I am not making the argument that that good cops aren't out there and that good cops will intervene when they see a crime happening. I'm speaking exclusively on the legality and the fact pattern of it. It's my opinion that most cops are generally good people. It is, however, also my opinion that, like politicians, before one can be a police officer, one must believe that men need to be governed or controlled. And I don't particularly like that. So, moving on. So, the duty to intervene. Sorry, guys. I, it, One of the things that has always bothered me about the police, every time you see the words "to protect and serve" on the side of a police car, that is a lie. That is false advertisement. They have no duty to protect. Ban shooting at moving vehicles.
So again, all I need to do is just try and run a cop over with my car,
Yeah,
and I get away.
we're in. The cops are not allowed to fire at your moving vehicle. Too easy. I've just robbed a bank. Get in the getaway car,
And
close the
refuse to
doors,
stop.
refuse to stop, and just run them over.
Well, and then after they've stopped you, keep fighting them. Don't give them an opportunity to issue that verbal warning. I'm sorry. I know this is dark, but it's so stupid. It's funny.
Require use of force continuum. Establish a force continuum that restricts the most severe types of force to the most extreme situations and creates clear policy restrictions on the use of each police weapon and tactic. That already exists.
I know. Like, literally, that already exists. A good portion of every single police officer's training revolves around this exact thing. In fact, again, going back to my dad in DeKalb County, if you want to get certified to carry mace, you have to get maced. I don't know how much more fair you could make it. In fact, if you want to carry mace in DeKalb County, at least this is how it was when my dad was certified for it some 20-something years ago. He actually had a couple of his instructors, and they waved their arms around, holding cans of mace. So he had no idea where it was coming, when it was coming. He got hit with the mace, And then what he had to do after he was hit with the mace was draw his weapon and hit a target 15 feet away. That's how you're certified to carry mace in DeKalb County, at least when he went through. But suffice it to say, that this use of force continuum, like it already exists. And frankly, most cops, especially once they've got a year or two of experience, they really instinctually begin to understand exactly where along this continuum things lie. In Danny and Alex's show, they were talking about the correct ways to respond to the police a couple of days ago. And one of the things that they pointed out was, know your rights. You don't have to let a cop search your car, but make it easy on yourself. Don't be a dickhead, because if you're a dickhead, the cop is going to logically assume that you're at least a slightly higher threat level than you otherwise would be.
Yeah. Um, I just wanted to pull up some of the numbers. For some reason, the 2019 numbers aren't popping up like they were a few days ago. I wonder if that's got anything to do with Google's active support for the terrorists called BLM and Antifa. Um, but the I did find this article about the 2018 numbers. Just out of about out of the roughly 350 million people in the U.S., there are about 800,000 local, state, and federal law enforcement officers. This is from Newsmax, and this was January 22nd of last year. So this article's over a year old. Um, and I picked an article that is older like this because it means that this conversation is happening outside of the context of George Floyd and the violent revolutionary insurrectionists that are attempting to murder the United States at present. So out of 350 million people in the U.S., ballpark, it's closer to 370 now, but 800,000 local, state, federal law enforcement officers. That number is also up a bit, nearly a million. Uh, but we're looking at 2017 numbers from this 2019 article. Um, so they all interact with the public 4 or 5 times more than they actually affect arrests. So we're talking about 30 to 50 million interactions per year. That's between 30 and 50 million times a year the police have an interaction with people. Now, keep in mind, that means that's 30 to 50 million arresting a murderer all the way down to letting you
Speeding
off
ticket.
for a
Yeah.
warning with a tail light out. Right? And that also includes those interactions. That also includes the police attended a public event. You know, the sheriff was at the ribbon cutting for a new local business. That's a police interaction that did not end in an arrest, but it is a police interaction. So, of those 30 to 50 million, we're talking about approximately 10 million arrests made for the year in 2017. Oh, I'm sorry, 2018. So here's the breakdown. 2018, 995 people shot and killed by the police. Out of 10 million arrests, so 30 million interactions, 10 million arrests, less than 1,000 people shot and killed. Twice as many white as black, right? And out of the 995 people who were shot, 47 unarmed, 23 white, 17 black. Last year, the numbers were even lower. It was 20 white and 10 black for 2019. Like I said, these numbers are older. You know, you're looking at 2018, 5 Hispanic and 2 unknown. Right? So, okay, let's be extra generous and say that we put the 2 unknown in the black category. And, oh, what's that? We're still not there. And last year's numbers, it was 20 white and I think it was 22 or 23 white and 10 black. So those numbers went down last year. And that has been attributed to what has been referred to as the Ferguson effect, where following an event like Michael Brown or George Floyd, where a bunch of violent criminals come out to protest the lawful enforcement of a violent criminal doing crime. Because make no mistake, these people are pro-crime, right? Oh, and Danielle, I'm glad you're watching. I said something about the protests and the riots on Friday. A little bit of shots fired at Alex there when I said that you cannot participate in the protests without supporting the riots. And then we got spun off, and I never made the point that I went into the show Friday intending to make that point and to make another important broad point related to it. And I think I'm going to do a separate video on this. The base premise of the protests, completely separate from the riots before the riots began, the base premise of the protests is that officers like Chauvin are representative of the entire police force. If your base premise is that one bad cop means that all police are evil and therefore we should abolish the police, if that's your base premise for your protest, and then the protest includes rioters and looters, then at a minimum, your argument is that all of the protesters are the same as the rioters and looters. Because the protests are also identity politics based in your political ideology and your ethnicity under the Black Lives Matter hashtag, you are also making the argument that all Democrats and all black people are bad, are looters and rioters and criminals. That's the argument you're making when you are supporting that protest. Because your base premise, and that's a false claim, by the way. I am not saying that all black people are violent. I am not saying that all Democrats are violent. I am saying that if your base premise is that one bad cop means all cops are bad, then your base premise extends to make the claim that all black people are violent and all Democrats are violent if your protest includes violence.
Yeah,
if your protest is one equals all, then the violence and looting in your protest is representative of your entire segmentality.
Yes. It's coming up on 8 o'clock, and we still haven't gotten to the 8th one.
Okay, fine.
Sorry, man. I got to drive to Noonan. It's only about 60 miles until my...
Require comprehensive reporting. Hey, require officers to report each time they use force or threaten to use force against civilians. Comprehensive reporting includes requiring officers to report whenever they point a firearm at someone in addition to... Have you ever watched a show? Have you ever watched television or a movie? It's a trope.
It's a trope for a reason.
It's a trope for a reason. Oh my God. Guys, when I was in an active war, I had to write stacks of reports every time I killed. I had to write active reports, stacks and stacks of paperwork to arrest a terrorist in a war zone who was caught mutilating children while in possession of weapons and drugs with copies of the plans to plant IEDs on the roadside. Require officers to report each time they use force and threat. That's already a thing.
Well, not only is that...
You wouldn't mention it unless you were making a straw man to bolster an argument that does not have merit. You could not be more full of shit than this.
Not only is this a straw man, But I guarantee you, if they had their way, part of what would happen is there would be an additional layer of report that would come along with this. That way, they could start to compile a whole bunch of nasty little statistics about how, oh, the city of Atlanta drew their firearms 12,133 times last year and only had 133 shootings. So that means about 12,000 times cops pulled their guns for no reason. Guarantee you that not only is this a straw man, but this is deliberately intended to introduce more bureaucracy to the police for a whole bunch of nefarious reasons. Plus, cops are, I mean, they're kind of like me and you and everybody else. Most of us don't like paperwork. And, they will try and avoid it just the same as the rest of us. So if you give them a whole bunch of extra fucking paperwork to fill out, no, not happy, Bob. Not happy.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that I can never get those IQ points back.
Oh yeah, and we're gonna have to look at these numbers. I'm gonna go ahead and make a prediction. I mean, we're about to call it a day. We're not going to dig into these numbers right now, but I want to make this prediction on air before we do dig into the numbers. So who knows? Maybe I'll end up falsifying my prediction. Maybe I'll find that I'm wrong. That could happen, right? Like when I predicted a V-shaped recovery before November. Oh, it's June? Whoops! That's a joke, Cameron, because we're in a clear pattern of V-shaped recovery right now. 2.5 million new jobs and stock market over 26,000. Anyway, here's my prediction. We're gonna go dig into these numbers, and here's what we're gonna find. In the places where they have enacted policies and been rated by this organization as having enacted the policies and seen these decreases in lethality in their departments, we're going to see an almost 1-for-1, if not an exact 1-for-1 ratio increase in crime reporting in those police districts. That's my prediction. Everywhere that you see these implemented, you will see increased crime.
Oh,
Damn,
hey.
Alex, why'd you come in so late? I was just attacking you.
But good morning. We're about to sign off, though. Glad you could stop by.
Alex, if you haven't already, check out the live stream we did Friday night. I'd love to talk to you about the accusation I made there. It's a little tongue in cheek, but it's good, and I think you're actually going to find that we agree and disagree on part of it in particular. You'll see soon. And but I love you, baby. But yeah, that is all we've got this morning. It's time for somebody to go to work. Not me. I'm working tonight. So y'all be safe out there. We'll see you tomorrow morning.
All right.